Have you ever, like, looked back at your
Right.
relationship history, really just laid it all out in front of you, and suddenly realized something kind of horrifying?
Oh, that moment where you realize you're basically dating different versions of the exact same person.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-mm.
You might be looking at completely different faces, totally different names, maybe even entirely different careers, but somehow you always end up with the exact same disappointing outcome.
It is a profound and honestly a deeply frustrating realization when that finally clicks.
Yeah.
Because you wake up one day, you review the last 5 or 10 years of your romantic life, and you realize you aren't just having bad luck, you are actively running a hidden script.
And that hidden script is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a big topic.
It really is. So, we are exploring a fascinating article titled Breaking the Cycle: Why We Attract the Wrong Partners.
Oh.
And it features insights from an intuitive practitioner named Tina Aldea. Our mission today is to figure out why we so consistently, completely ignore our own conscious dating checklists.
We really do throw them right out the window.
We do. So we're going to decode the hidden emotional patterns that are secretly running the show. And most importantly, we are going to figure out how you can actually break free from this relentless loop of dating the wrong people.
Which is a mission that carries just a lot of weight for anyone who has ever felt trapped by their own choices.
For sure.
Because logic, as clear and rational as it might be, it so rarely dictates our romantic behavior, no matter how much we wish it did.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the way I see it, dating is basically like going to the grocery store with a perfectly healthy, highly logical shopping list.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Right, so you've got your kale, your lean proteins, your organic fruit written down. You know exactly what sustains you.
Yeah, you're being super responsible.
Exactly. But somehow, by the time you get to the checkout line, your subconscious has snuck like 5 bags of toxic junk food into the cart when you weren't looking.
Just completely hijack the trip.
Yeah. You are just standing there swiping your credit card, wondering how you ended up with the exact things you swore you wouldn't buy.
That analogy captures the core conflict perfectly. Because to understand why you keep ending up with the relational equivalent of junk food, you have to examine the massive gap between what you say you want and what your underlying psychology actually drives you to choose.
Because if you ask anyone what they want in a partner, the conscious list is always so reasonable.
Oh, yeah. People list things like kindness, loyalty, emotional maturity,
Suitability.
shared value.
Exactly. No one is sitting down in a coffee shop writing, looking for someone who will leave my text on read for 3 days.
Or, seeking someone to gaslight me about my feelings and make me question my own sanity.
Right. Nobody writes that down. But a staggering number of people actively choose it over and over again.
Which is wild.
It is. The source material points out that much of human attraction operates entirely on a subconscious level.
So the logical brain isn't really in charge. Not at all. Your logical brain, the part of you that wrote that healthy grocery list, is not the part of you steering the cart.
Then who's driving?
The driver is actually a complex web of your underlying beliefs, your deepest emotional wounds, childhood experiences, and the accumulated baggage of your past relationships. They are quietly dictating who you feel drawn to.
But I want to push back on that for a second.
Go for it.
Let's say someone consciously knows, deep in their logical, rational brain, that they desperately need a stable partner because, they've been hurt repeatedly in the past.
Right.
Why does the subconscious have so much veto power over basic logic? I mean, if we know fire burns, why does the subconscious keep forcing us to put our hand on the stove?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yep.
And it's because the human brain is fundamentally wired for survival above all else.
Okay.
And to your ancient survival brain, safety is synonymous with the known, the
Okay.
familiar.
Even if the familiar is terrible.
Even if the familiar environment is deeply painful or chaotic, your subconscious knows exactly how to navigate it. It calculates the odds and thinks, I survived this specific type of emotional chaos before, so I know the rules of this game.
I can anticipate the danger.
Exactly. I can survive it again.
Wow. It's a brutal irony then. Our survival instinct is the exact thing putting us in emotional danger.
Yeah.
It's essentially a twisted form of self-protection.
That is precisely what it is. Because the unknown territory of a truly healthy, secure, stable relationship that is actually terrifying to a subconscious that has never experienced it.
Because it doesn't know the rules there.
Right. To your brain, the unknown is a potential threat, even if that unknown happens to be a kind, loving, supportive partner. The ultimate uncomfortable truth here is that people are instinctively drawn to familiar emotional experiences, not necessarily healthy ones.
which completely scrambles our internal radar.
Oh, totally.
And taking that a step further, the source material introduces a concept that completely reframes how we view romance. This subconscious drive for the familiar basically causes us to totally misinterpret what romantic chemistry actually is.
What's fascinating here is how deeply we misunderstand our own biological responses.
Yeah, we really do.
We have this massive cultural misconception that intense chemistry automatically equals compatibility.
Like in the movies.
Exactly. Pop culture, movies, music, they all sell us this idea that love is supposed to be this overwhelming, heart-pounding, breathless, chaotic force.
But that's not real compatibility.
No. The reality of human neuroscience tells a very different story. That intense, dizzying chemistry is often just a sign that your old, unhealed emotional patterns are being activated.
Let's break down the mechanics of that, because the source gives a really specific, kind of heartbreaking example.
The one about inconsistent affection.
Yeah, it talks about someone who grew up receiving very inconsistent affection. Maybe their caregivers were hot and cold loving one minute, distant the next.
A very common dynamic, unfortunately.
Right. And because of that childhood blueprint, as an adult, they will unconsciously seek out emotionally unreachable partners because that specific flavor of uncertainty, it feels like home.
And this is where the biology comes into play. When that person starts dating someone who is emotionally unavailable, it triggers a spike in cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Exactly. Their body goes into a state of heightened anxiety, just waiting for the partner to validate them.
Checking their phone every 2 seconds.
Yes. And when the partner finally texts back or shows a sliver of affection, the brain releases a massive hit of dopamine, the reward chemical.
So they mistake the extreme highs and lows of an anxiety cycle for passion.
They absolutely do. When the relief of that text message floods their system, they think, wow, I love them so much. This connection is so powerful.
When really it's just relief.
Right. What they're actually feeling is just their own nervous system finally calming down from a state of artificial panic. The source highlights the tragedy of this. It leads to different faces, different names, but the exact same physiological trap.
It's basically like being addicted to roller coasters.
No, that's a great way to put it.
You spend years getting used to the terror, the sudden drops, the adrenaline spikes. You convince yourself that feeling terrified is what fun feels like.
Yeah.
Then you finally get on a smooth, safe train ride, which is what a stable, emotionally available partner actually represents.
Yeah, and what happens?
Instead of enjoying the scenery, your nervous system completely panics. You look around, realize your heart isn't pounding out of your chest, and you conclude, well, this ride is boring.
Simply because you aren't fearing for your life.
Exactly.
That is the cruelest part of the consistency paradox. Your nervous system is literally tricking you into rejecting the exact healthy consistency that you consciously crave. You are perceiving peace and stability as a lack of chemistry.
We are actively throwing away the good ones because our broken radar labels a lack of trauma as boring.
We really are.
So if our chemistry radar is that fundamentally broken, we need to know what specifically is causing the malfunction.
Right, the root causes.
The source outlines 4 primary hidden emotional patterns that drive this behavior. If you are listening to this, pay close attention, because you might recognize your own relationship history in one of these 4 archetypes.
It's very likely. The first deeply ingrained pattern the source identifies is the fear of abandonment.
Let's look at how that manifests in the real world. The behavior here usually involves overinvesting incredibly early in a relationship.
Oh yeah, 0 to 60.
It's the person who goes on 2 dates and suddenly clears their entire weekend schedule, drops all their hobbies, and makes the new partner the absolute center of their universe.
And that rapid overinvestment happens because they are trying to outrun their own fear. People with this pattern will often ignore glaring red flags right out of the gate.
Because leaving isn't an option for them.
Exactly. They will tolerate incredibly poor treatment, disrespect, or flakiness because they are so terrified the person will leave. Their strategy is to make themselves so accommodating and so indispensable that the partner wouldn't dare abandon them.
But the paradox is that this behavior acts as a magnet for the exact type of person they should be avoiding.
It really does.
By having 0 boundaries and accepting poor treatment, they attract partners who are specifically looking to take advantage of someone. The fear of abandonment practically guarantees they will be abandoned, or at least deeply mistreated. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Moving to the second archetype, we have the pattern of low self-worth. This operates a bit differently.
How so?
This is the individual who secretly, deep down, doubts their own fundamental value. Because of that internal dialogue, they unconsciously settle for far less than they deserve in the external world.
They end up accepting relationships that act as a mirror, essentially reinforcing the negative image they already hold. If your internal monologue is constantly telling you that you are unlovable or not smart enough or not attractive enough, you're going to feel strangely comfortable with a partner who treats you exactly that way.
It feels familiar.
Right. A partner who treats you like absolute royalty would actually cause cognitive dissonance. It would feel fake to you because it conflicts with your core belief about yourself.
That is the tragedy of low self-worth. The external world just validates the internal state. You accept the love you think you deserve.
Man, that's heavy. What's the third one?
The third pattern is one that is incredibly common in caregiving personalities. The need to fix others.
Ah, the classic fixer.
You know the type.
I do. This is the person who is magnetically drawn to people who need rescuing. They look for partners with massive potential who are currently struggling with addiction, lack of ambition, or severe emotional unavailability.
Yes, the potential.
They operate under the grand illusion that if they just pour enough love, enough patience, and enough of their own energy into this broken person, they will magically transform them into a healthy, thriving partner.
Which leads to total emotional bankruptcy. A relationship built on fixing someone is not a romantic partnership. It is a rehabilitation project.
That's a great way to phrase it.
And the really tricky part, the fixer derives their own sense of worth from being needed, which means they actually require their partner to remain somewhat broken.
Wait, truly?
Yeah. Think about it. If the partner actually gets completely healthy and independent, the fixer loses their role. Mutual, equal growth is nearly impossible in that dynamic.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The fourth pattern they mentioned is the fear of true intimacy.
Yes.
And at first glance, this seems completely counterintuitive, almost backward.
Let's unpack the paradox there. Why does it seem backward?
Because the person stuck in the fear of intimacy is very often the one complaining the absolute loudest about their partner's lack of commitment.
The iron.
They're the ones constantly crying to their friends over brunch like, why won't they just commit to me? Why are they always so distant?
Right.
But the source suggests they are unconsciously, deliberately choosing unavailable partners because deep down, they're terrified of real vulnerability themselves.
It is a brilliant, if destructive, psychological defense mechanism. Self-sabotage is putting on a mask and masquerading as self-protection.
They are essentially using the bad partner as a subconscious shield. As long as they spend their energy chasing someone who will never fully let them in, they never actually have to risk being fully seen or truly vulnerable themselves.
You're safe.
Right. They get to safely play the victim of a cold, unavailable partner without ever having to confront their own massive, paralyzing fear of deep connection.
That is a profound realization for anyone to have. To look at the landscape of your life and finally admit, I am not the helpless victim of all these unavailable people. I am an active participant. I am recruiting them to keep myself safe from the terrifying reality of real intimacy.
So if we are trapped by these four patterns, the abandonment fear, the low self-worth, the fixer, and the intimacy fear, there must be a mechanism that keeps us stuck on the hamster wheel. How do these wounds actually translate into a repeated cycle?
Well, the source outlines a very clear, sequential, 7-step habit loop that these emotional wounds feed into.
Okay.
It operates just like any other deeply ingrained psychological habit, which means we can actually dissect it.
Let's break down how a person moves through that cycle, because the transition from one step to the next reveals so much about the blind spots we all have.
Definitely. The cycle begins with step 1, the initial attraction to the familiar personality type.
This is that broken chemistry radar we discussed.
Exactly, where the cortisol spike is mistaken for passion. Step 2 naturally follows willful blindness. Because the brain is getting that intoxicating hit of familiar chemistry, it actively ignores the glaring warning signs.
Which paves the way for step 3, deep emotional investment. You build a massive fantasy around who this person could be, rather than looking at who they actually are. You invest in the potential.
And because that foundation is built entirely on fantasy and ignored red flags, step 4 is inevitable: conflict and disappointment.
The bubble bursts.
The reality of the person finally breaches the walls of the fantasy. The unavailability or the toxicity can no longer be ignored. That leads directly to step 5, which is the resulting heartbreak when the relationship inevitably shatters.
The aftermath is where the real trap lies, though. Step 6 is reflection. But instead of reflecting on why they chose this person, the individual usually just blames the ex or bemoans their own terrible luck in dating.
They learn the wrong lesson.
Yeah. Which perfectly sets up step 7, repeating the exact same pattern from step 1, just with an entirely new cast of characters.
Wash, rinse, repeat. The grand illusion that keeps the cycle spinning is the belief that you simply need to find a different partner. The reality is that you need an entirely different pattern. You are changing the actors, but you are still directing the exact same tragic play.
So how do you stop the play?
Good question.
The source points to one specific internal tool that can actually cut through the noise of this 7-step loop, and that's intuition.
Intuition is presented as our deepest internal guidance system. It is that very quiet, subtle, visceral feeling in your body that tells you something feels slightly off.
Like a gut feeling.
Right. Or that someone isn't being completely genuine, or that you are bending your own boundaries to accommodate someone else.
But the text also acknowledges a massive obstacle here. Our emotional wounds, the intense fear of being alone, the intoxicating excitement of that toxic chemistry, or even just plain old wishful thinking, they constantly drown out those quiet, intuitive signals.
Are way too loud.
It's like having your car's check engine light illuminate on the dashboard, which is your intuition warning you. But your anxiety and trauma are like the car stereo blasting static at maximum volume. You can't process the visual warning sign because your sensory inputs are completely overwhelmed by the noise.
This raises an important question for anyone trying to navigate this in real life. If you have spent your whole life listening to the static, how do you differentiate between the two?
Exactly. How can you possibly tell the difference between the loud, thrilling voice of familiar chemistry, which we just established is a total trap, and the quiet voice of actual intuition? If they both manifest as strong internal signals, how do you know which one is telling the truth?
The distinction lies entirely in the physical quality of the feeling in your body.
Okay, tell me more.
The source material hints at this by describing intuition as a grounded response born of deep self-awareness. Intuition is quiet, it is calm, it is a clear, steady knowing, it does not argue with you.
And the trauma response.
Familiar chemistry or an activated trauma response is frantic. It has a reactive, desperate urgency to it. It feels like a compulsion.
Right.
If you feel incredibly anxious, if your chest is tight, or if you feel like you absolutely have to text them right this second to fix a terrible feeling of panic in your gut, that is not your intuition speaking. That is an old emotional wound flaring up, demanding to be soothed. Intuition doesn't panic.
That is such a crucial distinction, the panic versus the peace.
Very different feelings.
So let's say someone listening to this is really doing the work. They are learning to turn down the volume on the static of their anxiety. They are starting to tune into the check engine light of their intuition, and they're beginning to heal those 4 underlying patterns. What does life on the other side of this actually look like?
The source outlines some very tangible, real-world signs of shifting patterns. The first major milestone is that you start noticing red flags much earlier in the dating process.
Instead of spending 6 months making elaborate excuses for their bad behavior, you see it on date 2. You recognize the inconsistency, you feel the peace of your intuition say no thank you, and you simply walk away without a second thought.
Another major sign of healing is a dramatic decrease in desperation. You actually start to feel genuinely comfortable being alone.
Your own company becomes a safe space.
Yes. You are no longer willing to settle for a miserable relationship just to avoid the temporary discomfort of spending a Friday night by yourself.
Which gives you immense relational power. If you aren't terrified of being alone, you cannot be easily manipulated into staying in a toxic situation.
And tying it all back to our roller coaster analogy, the ultimate sign of healing is that you start to genuinely value consistency and trust over the emotional roller coaster.
So the train ride doesn't feel boring anymore.
Exactly. Your standards naturally improve. You simply stop tolerating any treatment that conflicts with your new, higher level of self-worth.
The text notes that the result of all this internal work is that relationships suddenly start to feel easier, which is an important word choice.
It is.
It doesn't mean a healthy relationship doesn't require effort, compromise, and communication. It just means it doesn't require constant, agonizing, soul-crushing struggle. Being with your partner shouldn't feel like going to war every single day.
A healthy relationship is supposed to be the safe harbor you retreat to. It is not supposed to be the storm itself.
Absolutely. Now, the source material also brings up an external tool that some individuals use when they are trying to break these deeply ingrained cycles.
Right, the artistic approach.
The text mentions Tina Aldea, a psychic artist who creates personalized soulmate sketches based on energy readings, aiming to capture the essence of a future partner. And whether you view energy readings as literal truth or simply as a fascinating psychological exercise, the source uses this to highlight a very powerful mechanism, which is visualization.
It's an interesting concept.
It is. But I want to make sure we emphasize the source's own caveat here. No psychic reading or external tool ever replaces the hard work of personal growth and emotional healing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of behavioral psychology, the mechanism at play here is giving the brain a target.
Okay, yeah.
Whether someone uses a psychic sketch or whether they simply use a dedicated journaling practice to deeply reflect on the exact traits they want in a partner, the profound benefit comes from clearly visualizing a healthier future.
It's about shifting the brain's focus from the known past to an unknown but positive future.
Precisely. When you have spent years or maybe even decades stuck in a relentless loop of toxic, disappointing relationships, your brain has a very hard time imagining anything else.
It just expects the bad.
Yeah, you develop a sort of learned helplessness. You lose hope. Engaging with an inspirational tool like a sketch, a vision board, or a detailed visualization practice actively pulls your brain out of the past. It gives your mind a concrete symbol of a healthy dynamic to focus on.
It gives you a specific destination to aim your compass toward. If you've never actually seen what a healthy, stable relationship looks like in your own life, having a physical or mental representation reminds you that a better reality is actually possible.
It breaks the negativity.
It interrupts the cycle of cynicism that keeps you trapped in that seven-step loop.
It operates as a vital anchor for hope while you continue the very real, very necessary psychological work of uncovering your worth and healing your wounds.
So what does this all mean?
Good summary question.
We've covered the uselessness of the conscious checklist, the neuroscience behind our broken chemistry radar, the 4 hidden emotional wounds driving the car, the 7-step loop that keeps us trapped, and the profound shift from panic to true intuition.
It means that attracting the wrong partners is not a life sentence, it's not a curse, and it certainly isn't just bad luck. It is simply an unconscious habit.
And habits can be broken.
Exactly. The beautiful thing about habits is that once you understand how they work, they can be dismantled.
The most profound takeaway here, for you listening right now, is that the path to finding the right partner actually has very little to do with endlessly swiping on dating apps.
Or reading articles on how to analyze someone else's text messages.
Exactly. The path to your ideal relationship starts entirely with you.
Yeah.
You have to understand your own hidden machinery before you can ever hope to recognize the right person when they finally stand in front of you.
I highly encourage anyone listening to do an honest, unflinching audit of their own relationship history.
Lay the timeline out.
Look for the patterns, not the faces. Ask yourself which of those 4 archetypes, the paralyzing fear of abandonment, the echo chamber of low self-worth, the exhausting role of the fixer, or the subconscious fear of true intimacy, might secretly be steering your choices.
It is incredibly tough work to look in that mirror, but it is the absolute only way to get out of the grocery store without a cart full of junk food.
It really is.
And as we wrap up today's deep dive into the hidden world of your subconscious, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked extensively about how a healthy, stable partner can initially feel boring to a nervous system that is deeply addicted to the highs and lows of chaos.
We did. The lack of panic is misinterpreted as a lack of passion.
So consider this. What if the very traits you find most boring in a potential partner right now are actually the exact signs of the deep, healing love that your nervous system is simply too afraid to accept?
Oh, wow.
What if boredom, at least in those early stages of a healthy relationship, is actually just a sound of safety?
That is a very powerful, perspective-shifting question to sit with.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into your own subconscious. Until next time.